Wyoming Territory, 1877. The wind cut low across the plains outside Sweetwater, carrying dust and the weight of what could never be taken back. Evelyn Boone stood on the edge of the clapboard porch, arms wrapped tight around her waist, watching the town she used to call hers. She was only 17 when she married Samuel Boone, a rancher's boy from 3 homesteads over. Her father had told her it was foolish, a girl too young to know her own mind. Her mother had cried for a week. The church ladies shook their heads behind their fans. But Evelyn had married for love and for a promise whispered in a barn loft with stars blinking through the rafters. Now, at 20, barefoot and dust-covered, she was a widow and cast out with nothing but a worn satchel and the ache of a mistake that had cost her everything. He died of fever, she had told the pastor when she'd come begging for help. I buried him myself. I just need a place to rest a while. But the church turned her away. So did her father, who had slammed the door before she could finish her first sentence. You made your bed, he'd said. You can lie in it out in the dirt. Evelyn had not cried then. She had not cried in a long time. Now she wandered, sleeping in haylofts and behind train depots, trading sewing mending for bread. She kept her wedding ring on a string around her neck not because she missed Samuel, but because it reminded her of the price of trusting the wrong man too soon. She was heading nowhere in particular when her boots gave out 3 miles east of Copper Bend. She was walking the rest barefoot by then, her feet blistered and bleeding. That was when she saw him. He was leaning against a fence post, watching a one-eyed mule chew on a fence rail. Tall, lean, with a worn hat pulled low and a half-healed cut across his jaw. A cowboy, no doubt, sunburned and rough at the edges. He looked like every other man she had learned not to trust. But when he saw her limping along the road, he stood up straight, wiped his hands on his jeans, and called out. You need help, miss? Evelyn stopped walking. She looked at the man, then at the saddle horse and wagon beside the fence. She could hear water sloshing in a barrel. I do not want trouble, she said. Then you are in luck. He walked toward her slow, hands open at his sides. Because I do not aim to give any. He stopped a few feet from her, his eyes scanning her torn dress and bare feet. You look about ready to fall over. I am fine, she said quickly, even as her knees wobbled. Just passing through. He nodded once. Name is Porter Ellard. I got a bunkhouse yonder and stew on the fire. If you are hungry, I will not ask questions. Evelyn hesitated. Her stomach ached. Her hands trembled. I do not take charity. Good, he said. I do not give it. You help me mend a gate, you earn your supper. Fair? She nodded before her body gave her a choice. She followed him up to the ranch, where the wind broke against the hills and the trees around the house whispered like they were glad to see her. He gave her water first. Then a pair of old boots that were still better than bare feet. She helped him fix the gate latch while the sun dropped low, and when her hands shook too bad to hold the hammer, he took it gently from her without a word and finished the job himself. Inside, the air smelled like stew and wood smoke. She sat at his kitchen table, too tired to speak. He ladled stew into a tin bowl and slid it in front of her, along with a thick slice of cornbread. Eat, he said. Then you can tell me who hurt you enough to make you walk this far on foot. She stared at the bowl, then at him. His face was quiet, not soft, but steady, like he would sit there as long as it took. I married too young, she said finally. He was not cruel, just not prepared to be a husband. He died before we figured it out. After he passed, my folks would not take me back. Said I shamed them? Porter nodded once, like he had seen worse and did not need every detail. You got a place to go? She shook her head. I was hoping to find work in Cody. But I am not sure I will make it that far. You are welcome here as long as you want to stay, he said. I could use the help. She looked at him, really looked. He was not smiling, not charming her, not trying to win anything. He was just offering her something she had not had since she was 17, a place to rest, a place to belong. You do not know me, she said. I do not need to, he replied. You showed up tired and honest. That is enough for me. That night, he gave her the spare room. She lay on the clean sheets and stared at the ceiling, unsure what to make of the quiet in her chest. It was the first time in 3 years she had felt anything close to safe. The next morning, she stepped outside to find him already splitting wood in the yard. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his hair damp beneath his hat. He looked up when he saw her and gave a small nod. Sleep all right? She nodded. Better than I deserved. He set the axe down and walked toward her, slow and easy. You deserve better than what the world gave you, Evelyn Boone. Maybe you just need someone to remind you of that. Her breath caught. She was not ready to believe in kind words again. But something in the way he said her name made her want to. She stayed. One day passed, then another. She helped with the chickens, the laundry, the books. Porter never pushed. He just made space for her grief, for her silence, for her slow return to herself. And slowly, something grew between them. Not fast or loud, but steady like the rhythm of boots on dirt. A touch of fingers when passing a cup. A glance held just a moment too long. The way his voice softened when he said her name. Evelyn had learned not to trust too quickly. But Porter never asked for her trust. He just earned it, little by little. Until one morning, she found a coffee cup set out beside his on the porch rail. 2 cups. Side by side. And her heart started to believe in something again. By the second week, Evelyn had learned the rhythm of Porter's land. The barn creaked into morning before the light reached the ridge, and the hens called out just ahead of the wind. There was a certain hush to the place, as if the hills themselves held their breath and listened. She had taken to rising early, just after Porter stepped out, and folding the quilt over the edge of the bed with quiet, practiced care. The boots he lent her still pinched, but she didn't mention it. She had learned that silence could be a kind of grace, and Porter never filled it unless invited. That morning, she found him by the paddock, his sleeves rolled up to the elbows as he worked a rasp along the hooves of a young gelding. The animal tossed its head once, but Porter didn't flinch. You handle him like you've known him all his life, Evelyn said, stepping just close enough to catch the smell of leather and dust. Close enough, he replied, not looking up. His dam was mine. Foaled him out back of that big ash tree 3 winters ago. She leaned against the rail, watching the horse's muscles shift beneath its hide. You remember all of them? I try not to forget the ones I raise. The wind tugged at her hair, loosened from the braid she'd worn to sleep. I used to think I'd have a place like this, she said. With someone who knew how to make things last. Porter stood and brushed the filings from his hands. What changed your mind? Everything, she said, and then, quieter. But mostly me. He opened the gate and let the gelding out into the pasture. The horse kicked up once, then settled into a trot, tail swishing in the morning light. You ever break one yourself? He asked. No. I watched my uncle do it once. He got thrown clean over the fence. Broke his collarbone. Sounds like he had more pride than sense. She smiled without meaning to. He drank vinegar straight, said it was good for the blood. Porter chuckled, low and brief. Lot of folks mistake stubbornness for wisdom. They walked together back toward the house, their steps slow, unhurried. Evelyn noticed the way he kept pace with her, though his stride was twice hers. She had grown used to being rushed, talked over, pulled forward, left behind. Porter simply matched her. Inside, the kitchen held the scent of burned coffee and flour. She set about mixing dough while he split kindling near the stove. The silence between them felt companionable, the kind that came when nothing needed fixing. Where'd you learn to cook? He asked, glancing over. From a widow 3 farms over. She took me in during a flood one spring. Said I had hands like a squirrel and needed a purpose. What happened to her? She died the next fall. Pneumonia. I wrote her name in my Bible, even though I never saw her in a church. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. Not all saints sit in pews. Evelyn paused, hands dusted with flour. What about you? You always been alone out here? Not always, he said. Then, after a beat, my brother ran this place with me. He went north to Helena last year. Got married. Sends letters sometimes. You ever think about leaving? He shook his head. I've seen enough of what's out there. I like the land under my boots. It listens better than most men. She nodded, understanding something in him without needing to name it. That afternoon, she helped dig out the irrigation trench that had clogged after the last rain. The soil was heavy, and her shoulders ached, but Porter handed her water often and didn't let her carry more than she could. When they finished, he sat beside her under the cottonwood and handed her a slice of cold peach pie wrapped in a cloth. Where'd this come from? She asked, taking it. Neighbor woman dropped it off 2 days ago. Said I looked like I'd forgotten what fruit tasted like. You didn't mention it before. I was waiting to see if you'd stay. She ate in silence for a while, the sweetness sharp after weeks of bread and beans. You always this patient? She asked, not looking at him. His eyes were on the sky, where a hawk circled high above the hills. Only when something's worth waiting for. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. The way her shoulders eased against the tree trunk said enough. That night, she found a dress folded on the edge of the bed. Not new, but clean and mended, with a row of tiny shell buttons down the back. A note stitched into the hem read, From Porter Ellard 1862. She held it to her chest, breath caught. Your mother's? She asked when Porter appeared in the doorway. He nodded. She was shorter than you, but it should fit. I can't take something that belonged to her. You're not taking it, he said. You're wearing it. That's different. She turned away, unsure how to hold the sudden warmth in her throat. I'll wear it tomorrow, she said, voice low. I'll be waiting, he replied. And she believed he would be. Evelyn wore the dress at sunrise. The cotton had thinned with age, but the stitching along the seams held firm, and the color soft cornflower matched the morning sky. She stood by the wash-basin, hands trembling not from fear, but from the unfamiliar weight of being remembered by someone. Porter didn't comment when she stepped into the kitchen. He only nodded once, then pulled a chair out for her and slid a bowl of oats across the table. She sat without speaking. The light came in through the window and caught on the buttons down her back. After breakfast, he handed her a folded slip of paper. List from town, he said. I was going to ride into Copper Bend after morning chores. Store owes me sugar and nails. You come, I'll show you where to get the thread you like. I haven't been back there, she said, folding the paper once more before slipping it into her apron. Not since before I left Samuel's land. No one's going to ask where you've been, he said. And if they do, they'll answer to me. She glanced toward the door, then back at him. I don't want pity. You won't get it. Just flour, coffee, and a bit of quiet. The ride to town took most of the morning. She rode astride a bay mare named Dot, and though the saddle creaked at every shift, the mare kept her pace steady alongside Porter's gelding. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence between them had settled into something easy, like the space between rows in a well-planted field. Copper Bend hadn't changed. 2 rows of low buildings, a smithy halfway down the main road, and a sun-faded sign above the mercantile door. Evelyn stepped down from the mare and smoothed her skirt without thinking. Her boots held her steady now. Porter tied the reins and said, I'll be at the feed store. Holler if you need help. Inside the mercantile, the air smelled of lamp oil and dried oranges. She moved quietly through the rows, picking out thread and flour, a bar of lye soap, and a tin of camphor salve. At the counter, Mrs. Bergen looked up from her ledger, her spectacles low on her nose. You're Boone's girl, she said. I'm Evelyn Ellard, she replied, voice even. The older woman blinked once, then made no further comment. She wrapped the goods and passed them across without another word. Outside, Porter stood beside the wagon with a sack of oats slung over one shoulder. Trouble? He asked. No, Evelyn said. Just a woman with a long memory. He loaded the wagon without fuss. Later, as they rode out past the edge of town, she looked back only once. The buildings grew small behind her, and with them, the grip of old judgments. That evening, she stitched a worn curtain back into place while Porter sanded a broken yoke at the table. The lamplight pooled between them, soft and golden. I was thinking, he said, turning the wood slowly, about fixing up that shed near the creek. Could make it into a smokehouse come fall. She tied a knot and bit the thread. You'll need hickory. I can help cut it. He set the wood down. You mind getting your hands dirty? I'm not afraid of work. He leaned back, one elbow on the table. You're not afraid of much, are you? She lowered the curtain. I was. For a long time. She met his eyes. Not lately. He didn't smile, but there was something steady in the way he looked at her, like he was seeing all of her at once, not just the girl who'd showed up barefoot and worn. I'll be fencing the west pasture tomorrow, he said. Could use a second pair of hands. I'll be there. He rose then, slow and deliberate, as though there were no need to rush. Before leaving the room, he paused. I meant to tell you, he said over his shoulder. The dress suits you. She waited until his footsteps faded down the hall before she let herself breathe. Outside, the wind pushed through the trees, and somewhere beyond the barn, the horses moved against the fence. She sat in the lamplight a while longer, her fingers resting on the hem of a dress that still carried the warmth of someone else's story but fit her life now just the same. The west pasture sloped gentle toward the creek, where the cottonwoods thickened and the ground softened with spring melt. The fence had given way in two places where frost had heaved the posts, and cattle had started to nose their way through the gaps. Evelyn carried a coil of wire across her shoulder, Porter hauling the dig bar and a fresh post. They didn't speak for a time. The work set its own rhythm: dig, drive, tamp, stretch until sweat gathered behind her knees and the sun climbed above the ridge. Porter leaned his weight into the post-hole digger. You ever think about keeping stock of your own? Evelyn straightened, wiping her brow with her sleeve. I thought about chickens once. Didn't get past the dreaming. You'd have a knack for it, he said, tapping the new post down with the back of the shovel. You watch things close. Most folks just glance. She tested the tension on the wire. When you've had to patch holes with nothing but twine and prayer, you stop taking things for granted. He looked at her a moment, then dropped the shovel and reached for the second post. My mother used to say a fence is only as strong as the hands that set it. She must have been hard to argue with. Porter gave a short breath of laughter. She once chased off a pair of rustlers with a skillet. Broke one's nose clean. Evelyn pressed the wire flat against the wood. What happened to her? Passed during the winter I turned 20. Fever took her fast. My brother and I found her by the stove, pot still boiling. I'm sorry. He shook his head. She'd already laid out the bread dough. We baked it that night. Didn't know what else to do. Evelyn didn't answer. The wind came down the hill and stirred the grass around their boots. She knelt to anchor the bottom wire. Her fingers worked the loop steady, even as her throat tightened. They finished the last break just past midday. Porter handed her the canteen and sat beside her on the edge of a fallen log. The sun had burned the clouds away, leaving the sky hard and bright. She took a long drink, then passed it back. You never asked me what I want now. I figured you'd tell me if you knew. I think I'm starting to, she said. But it's not anything I can pack in a saddlebag. You thinking of staying? She didn't answer right away. She watched a hawk circle above the far ridge, its shadow flickering over the grass. I don't want to be a guest in someone else's life, she said finally. I want to build something. Plant things. Know they'll still be there come fall. Porter set the canteen down. Then build it here. Her eyes met his. You sure? I wouldn't say it if I wasn't. They walked back slow, the tools slung over their shoulders, the wire clinking with each step. She didn't need to ask what came next. The path had begun to shape itself beneath her feet. That evening, she found 2 chairs pulled near the edge of the porch, a stack of seed catalogs on the table between them. She sat without asking, thumbing through pages of sweet corn and pole beans. Porter handed her a pencil. "Mark what you want," he said. "We'll trade with the merchant next month." She circled a row of summer squash. "You're letting me pick? It's your ground too now." The sky turned violet over the hills, and the first stars pricked through above the barn. She leaned back in the chair, legs tucked beneath her, and let the quiet settle. Porter didn't try to fill it. He just sat beside her, his hand resting loose on his knee, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. She reached over and set her hand over his. He looked down, then up at her. There was no surprise in his face. Only recognition. "I don't know how to do this slow," she said. "We're not rushing," he answered. "We're just walking the same road." She didn't pull back. Neither did he. The night unfolded around them, steady as breath. And Evelyn Boone, who had once been cast out with nothing but a satchel and a scarred heart, sat beside a man who saw her not as a burden or a mistake, but as something whole. She didn't need to ask if she belonged. She already knew. By early June, the creek had dropped enough to show the flat stones beneath its surface, and the air carried the scent of wild mint and warming earth. Evelyn stood barefoot at its edge, skirts lifted just high enough to keep dry as she rinsed carrots pulled fresh from the garden rows she'd helped plant with her own hands. The soil had been stingy at first, but she'd learned how to coax it, feeding it with ash from the stove, turning it before rain, watching the angle of the sun through the cottonwoods. Porter's voice carried down from the ridge. "You'll have rabbits after those if you leave the tops out." She didn't look up. "Then I'll trap them and stew them come Sunday. You're turning into a regular steward of the land. You say that like it's a surprise." "It's not," he said, stepping closer. "Just satisfying to see." He took the basket from her and dried his hands on the hem of his shirt. She watched him a moment, then turned back to the water. "Your brother wrote again," she said. "Envelope came with the feed delivery." Porter crouched beside her. "He sent word about the baby? Midwife says mid-July? He wants to name her after your mother." He nodded, quiet. "He'll be a good father. I think you would be too." His gaze met hers, steady and without hesitation. "You thinking of children already?" "I think of what might grow," she answered. "Not just in the ground." They walked back toward the house together, the basket swinging between them. The porch had been swept clean that morning, and the dried herbs hanging from the eaves crinkled in the breeze. Porter set the basket down and turned to her. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the land up behind the orchard. The one with that flat bit near the pines. What about it? I could build a second cabin there. Just enough room to start a new wing if ever we needed it." Evelyn crossed her arms loosely. "You mean for someone else to live in?" "I mean for you and me to start fresh. Not because what we have now isn't enough, but because I want to build something with your name on it too." She studied him. "You're not a man for grand gestures." "I'm not," he agreed. "But I meant what I said. This is your ground too. And I want to make it official." He reached into his jacket pocket and drew out a small, square box carved from dark walnut. Inside, wrapped in a strip of linen, lay a gold band, not new, but polished, the kind passed down through families too practical to believe in waste. "It was my grandmother's," he said. She had hands wide as shovels and patience longer than winter. Evelyn looked at the ring, then at him. "You sure?" "I'd been sure since you marked squash in the seed book and told me you weren't afraid to stay." She took the ring and slipped it on. It fit without effort, like it had waited for her all this time. They were married the following Sunday beneath the cottonwoods, the creek running low and clear behind them. Maybelle's dress had been altered once more, hem let out and sleeves stitched with lace Evelyn found in the bottom of a trunk. Porter wore his best shirt and stood taller than she'd ever seen him, as though the weight he'd carried alone for so long had finally eased. The preacher from over the ridge read a few verses, then stepped back. Porter took Evelyn's hands, his thumbs brushing over the calluses she no longer tried to hide. "I promise steady ground," he said. "And room to grow." Evelyn's voice didn't waver. "I promise presence. And not letting the quiet grow too wide between us." They kissed as the wind picked up through the trees, scattering petals from the wild plum blossoms down around them. By midsummer, the new cabin's foundation had been laid, and the first frame rose under Porter's hand with Evelyn cutting and measuring beside him. Chickens chased beetles through the garden rows, and the first cucumbers hung heavy on the vine. On their porch, 2 chairs still sat side by side, worn smooth now by use. Evenings brought music, a fiddle Porter's brother sent as a gift, and Evelyn's voice, low and warm, singing tunes she remembered from her mother's kitchen. They hosted neighbors that August for a harvest supper, simple food, strong coffee, and laughter that lingered long after the sun dipped behind the ridge. No one whispered about where Evelyn had come from anymore. Folks looked at her and saw what she was now: wife, partner, woman of the land. And when Porter stood close beside her, hand resting at the small of her back as they said goodbye to guests, there was no mistaking the quiet joy between them. They had built it, not from ease, but from the long, hard choosing of one another. And every morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of his boots on the floorboards, the smell of coffee, the sun just beginning to warm the hills, and knew she was home.